I used to think life was easy, not because I was special, not because I worked hard, but because everything was already there for me. I lived with my father in a comfortable house. Food was always ready. Bills were always paid. Problems never reached me. I never asked where the money came from. I never wondered how much effort it took. Life felt smooth, almost too smooth. My days passed quietly. I woke up late, watched videos, listened to music, and wasted time without feeling guilty. Tomorrow did not matter to me. The future felt far away. Sometimes my friends would ask, "What will you do later in life?" I would smile and answer easily, "Something will happen. Life is fine." At that time, I truly believed it. But my father watched me closely. He never shouted. He never complained. He just observed. One evening, while we were sitting together, he looked at me and said something that stayed in my mind. Life does not stay easy forever. His voice was calm, but serious. That calmness made the words heavier. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. The next morning, he asked me to wake up early, much earlier than usual. I felt irritated, confused, and sleepy. Still, I followed him. That day, he took me outside my comfort, outside my routine, outside the life I thought was normal. And slowly, without realizing it, I began to see a world I had never noticed before. A world where people worked not because they wanted to, but because they had to. A world where effort was not a choice, but a necessity. And that was only the beginning. Life did not remain the same. Time moved quietly, without asking anyone. I grew older. Responsibilities slowly replaced comfort. The world that once felt easy began to feel heavy. My father aged too. His hair turned gray. His steps became slower. But his eyes, they still carried the same depth. One evening, I noticed something different. He was sitting alone quietly, looking outside the window. I asked him, "Are you tired?" He smiled gently and said, "No. I'm just thinking." That smile was not the same as remember before. It was softer, more fragile. Days started repeating themselves. Doctor visits, medicines on the table, silence in the house. The man who once carried everything without effort, now needed help to stand. And for the first time in my life, I felt afraid. Not of failure, not of work, but of time. One night, while helping him walk to his room, he stopped and held my hand. His grip was weak, but his words were strong. "Now you understand," he said, "why I never wanted life to be too easy for you." I could not speak. My throat felt tight. I wanted to tell him something, but words didn't come. As days turned into months, his world grew smaller. Short walks, quiet mornings, long evenings. And one day, while sitting beside him, I realized something painful. The easy life I once enjoyed was built on his strength. And now, that strength was fading. I sat there, holding his hand, wishing time could slow down, but time never listens. One morning, the house felt unusually quiet. No footsteps, no coughing sound from his room, just silence. I walked in slowly. He was awake, but weak. His eyes opened when he saw me, and a small smile appeared on his face. "Sit," he said softly. I sat beside him, holding his hand. His hand felt lighter than before. almost like it could disappear. He looked at me for a long moment, as if he was trying to remember everything at once. You know, he said, I was never hard on you because I didn't care. His voice was slow, tired, but clear. I wanted you to understand life, before life became hard on you. I nodded quietly. My chest felt heavy. I used to think you were strict, I said. I didn't understand then. He smiled again. A peaceful smile. That's how it always is, he replied. We understand, when it's almost too late. The room stayed silent for a while. Outside, birds were chirping. Life was moving on, as if nothing was changing. But inside that room, everything was changing. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, then opened them again. Promise me something, he said. I leaned closer. Live a life you don't regret, he continued. Not an easy life, a meaningful one. My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let them fall. I promise, I said. He squeezed my hand gently. That evening, the sun went down slowly. The sky turned orange, then dark. I sat beside him, watching his breathing become softer, slower. And in that quiet moment, I realized, some lessons are taught with words, and some with silence. That night, I did not sleep. I stayed awake, sitting on a chair near his bed, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breath. Every sound felt important. Every moment felt fragile. Sometimes he opened his eyes, looked at me, and closed them again, as if he was reassured that I was there. In the early morning, his breathing changed. It became slower, deeper, uncertain. I stood up, my heart beating fast. I called his name, softly at first, then louder. He opened his eyes one last time. He looked calm, not afraid, not worried, just tired. His lips moved slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I held his hand tighter, and then, very quietly, he was gone. The room felt empty, even though I was still standing there. Time stopped for a moment. The world felt unreal. Later that day, people came. Relatives, neighbors. Voices filled the house again. But for me, everything sounded distant. I kept remembering his words, his silence, his smile. Days passed. I returned to work. I handled responsibilities. I did everything I was supposed to do. But something inside me had changed forever. The house no longer felt the same. The chair where he used to sit stayed empty. The room stayed quiet. Sometimes, in the evening, I would sit there alone, thinking about the boy I once was. The boy who thought life was easy. The boy who didn't understand effort, or time, or loss. And slowly, I understood something. An easy life teaches nothing, but a meaningful life leaves something behind. After everything, life did not stop. It never does. The sun still rose every morning. People still rushed to work. The world moved forward, quietly ignoring my loss. At first, I moved like a machine. Wake up. Get ready. Go out. Come back. I spoke when needed. Smiled when expected. But inside, something felt empty. Some evenings, I would catch myself turning my head, almost expecting to see him sitting there, waiting, watching, thinking. But the chair stayed empty. One day, while cleaning the house, I found something familiar. An old notebook. Its cover was worn out, pages slightly yellow. It was his. I sat down and opened it slowly. Inside were small notes, thoughts, observations, simple words, written over many years. He had written about work, about responsibility, about raising a child in a world that doesn't stay kind. One line stopped me. Strength is not about never falling. It is about standing up, again and again, even when no one is watching. I closed the notebook and held it close. For the first time since his passing, I allowed myself to feel everything: the sadness, the gratitude, the understanding. From that day on, I stopped running from responsibility. I worked harder, not for money alone, but for meaning. I treated people with more patience. I listened more. I spoke less. Slowly, I became the person he hoped I would become. Not perfect, just aware. And sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet again, I would look up and whisper, "I understand now." Life shaped itself into a routine, but it no longer felt empty. I grew older, wiser, and more patient. The lessons he left behind stayed with me, guiding me in moments when no one else could. One day, I realized something unexpected. I had become a father. Holding my child for the first time, I felt a strange mix of joy and fear. Joy, because life had given me something precious. Fear, because I now understood the weight of responsibility. Late at night, while my child slept, I would sit nearby and think about my own father. I remembered his silence, his strength, the way he taught without forcing, and I understood his choices better than ever before. As my child grew, I tried to follow the same path. I didn't make life too easy. I didn't make it too hard either. I let mistakes happen. I let lessons take time. Sometimes my child would look at me with confusion, just like I once looked at my father. And in those moments, I saw myself. Time continued its quiet journey. Hair turned gray again. Steps slowed again. One evening, as I sat alone, watching the sky change colors, I felt his presence in my thoughts. Not as pain, but as guidance. I smiled softly and whispered, "Your lessons live on." And life continued. As time passed, my child grew into a young adult. I watched closely, not to control, but to understand. There were days of laughter, and days of silence, days when everything felt right, and days when nothing did. One evening, my child came home late. The face looked tired, not physically, but mentally. We sat together without speaking at first, just like my father and I once did. Then the words came. "Life feels heavy," my child said. "I'm trying, but I don't know if I'm doing enough." That sentence hit me deeply. I heard my younger self in those words. I took a slow breath and said, "Life was never meant to be light all the time." My child looked at me, listening carefully. "It becomes meaningful," I continued, "when you keep moving forward, even when you feel unsure." There was silence again, but this time, it felt comforting. Later that night, after my child went to sleep, I stood by the window, the same place where my father once sat, the same quiet view, and suddenly, I understood something new. We don't just inherit faces, or names, or habits. We inherit lessons, passed silently, from one generation to the next. And as long as those lessons live on, no one is ever truly gone. As the years moved forward, I noticed something else changing. Not the world, not the people, but me. I had started to slow down. Mornings felt quieter now. Evenings felt longer. And sometimes, my body reminded me that time never walks backward. One day, while climbing the stairs, I stopped halfway to catch my breath. For a moment, I smiled. I remembered my father doing the same thing. Years ago. That memory didn't hurt anymore. It felt warm. Later that evening, I sat alone with a cup of tea. The house was calm, peaceful. I opened the same old notebook again. The pages were fragile now. I realized something important. This notebook was never just his story. It was becoming mine too. So I picked up a pen. I began to write. Not about success. Not about achievements. But about life. Its weight. Its beauty. Its quiet lessons. I wrote about mistakes. About patience. About learning things a little late. And as I wrote, I felt closer to him than ever before. Not because he was gone, but because his voice had become part of mine. That night, I slept peacefully. No regrets. No rush. Just gratitude. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had to, but because my mind was already awake. Sunlight entered the room softly, touching the walls, revealing small details I had ignored for years. The house felt familiar, yet different. I walked slowly, my steps careful, as if I was walking through memories. In the kitchen, I prepared tea the way my father used to. Not perfectly, not quickly, but patiently. As the water boiled, I stood there thinking about how fast life moves, and how slowly we understand it. When my child came into the room, still half asleep, I smiled. "Good morning," I said. That simple moment felt important. More important than meetings, deadlines, or plans. We sat together, drinking tea in silence. Not an awkward silence. A comfortable one. I realized then, this was how life spoke to us. Not loudly, not clearly, but gently. Later that day, I went for a walk. The road was the same, but I was not. I noticed old trees, small shops, people rushing past without looking up. Everyone was carrying something invisible. Dreams, fears, responsibilities. I understood them better now. At a small park nearby, I sat on a bench. Children were playing, laughing freely. Their laughter reminded me of a time when life felt endless. I wondered which lessons they would learn too late, just like I did. And suddenly, I felt thankful. Thankful for mistakes. Thankful for loss. Thankful for time. Because without them, I would never have learned what truly matters. I stood up slowly and continued walking forward. Not rushing, not stopping, just moving, the way life teaches us to. That walk stayed with me for a long time, not because it was special, but because it was ordinary, and I had finally learned how valuable ordinary moments are. In the following weeks, I began to change small habits. I listened more. I interrupted less. I allowed silence to exist, without trying to fill it. People noticed. Some said I looked calmer. Others said I spoke differently now. I think it was because I was no longer in a hurry. One evening, my child asked me a question. Do you ever miss your father? I didn't answer immediately. I looked at the wall, at the fading light, at the shadows moving slowly. Yes, I said. Not in pain, but in presence. My child didn't fully understand. And that was okay. Some things can only be understood after time has passed through you. That night, I went back to the notebook again. I read the same lines, but they felt new. Words don't change. We do. I added more pages. I wrote about raising a child in a world full of noise. I wrote about choosing patience when anger feels easier. I wrote about strength, not as power, but as calm endurance. Sometimes I stopped writing and just sat there, listening to the quiet, the same quiet that once scared me. Now it felt like home. Outside, the night moved slowly. Inside, I felt steady. Life was no longer about proving anything. It was about carrying lessons forward, without turning them into burdens. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this story was still moving. Time has a strange way of teaching. It doesn't explain. It doesn't warn. It simply shows. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of an old mirror. I wasn't looking for anything special, but the face looking back at me felt unfamiliar. There were lines near my eyes, a quiet tiredness, a calm I never had before. I smiled slightly. This was not the face of someone chasing life. This was the face of someone walking with it. Later that day, I met an old friend, someone who knew me from my younger days. We talked about work, about family, about how quickly years disappear. At one point, he laughed and said, "You've changed." I nodded. "I hope so," I replied, because staying the same would have meant learning nothing. That evening, as I returned home, I passed by a small street market. People were arguing, laughing, selling, buying. Life was happening everywhere. I realized something quietly. No one is living an easy life. Some just hide the weight better than others. At home, I sat with my child again. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes presence is the strongest form of care. I remembered how my father used to sit with me, saying very little, teaching so much. And now, without trying, I was doing the same. Not repeating his words, but continuing his way. The night grew deeper. Before going to sleep, I looked at the notebook once more. I didn't write anything. I just placed my hand on it and closed my eyes. Some lessons don't need words anymore. They live inside you. The days after that felt steady, not exciting, not dramatic, just real. I began to enjoy the rhythm of ordinary life. Morning light through the window, the sound of footsteps in the house. Small conversations that didn't need meaning. One afternoon, while sorting old things, I found a photograph. It was old, slightly faded. My father was standing there, younger, stronger, with a calm confidence in his eyes. I studied that photo for a long time. I tried to remember what he was thinking in that moment. Was he worried about the future? Was he tired? Or was he quietly hoping that everything would turn out fine? I placed the photo back carefully. Some questions don't need answers. That evening, I cooked dinner slowly. Not because I had time, but because I wanted to. The smell filled the house. It felt warm, alive. My child sat nearby, talking about small things, daily struggles, simple plans. I listened, not to fix anything, just to understand. At one point, my child said, "You always seem calm now." I smiled. "Calm comes," I replied, "when you stop fighting time." Later, after everyone went to bed, I stepped outside for a moment. The sky was quiet. Stars scattered softly above. I thought about how many nights my father must have stood somewhere like this, thinking thoughts he never shared. And I felt close to him again, not through memory, but through experience. Life had slowly placed me exactly where he once stood. And now I understood why he spoke less, why he watched more, why he trusted time. I went back inside, closed the door gently, and let the night settle. The story wasn't over. It was still unfolding, one quiet moment at a time. As more time passed, a quiet clarity settled inside me. Life no longer felt like something to solve. It felt like something to accept. I stopped asking why certain things happened. I stopped wishing moments could return. Instead, I began to value what was still here. My child had grown stronger, more independent, less in need of guidance. Sometimes that made me proud. Sometimes, strangely, it made me lonely. One evening, we sat together again, just like so many times before. My child spoke about plans, about moving forward, about building a life of their own. I listened carefully, not with fear, not with control, but with trust. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat alone in the same quiet room. The notebook lay in front of me. I turned its pages slowly, from the first words my father wrote, to the last lines I had added. 3 lives, woven together through time. I realized something gentle, but powerful. Every generation carries a weight, and every generation decides how much of that weight to pass on. I had received mine. I had carried it, and slowly, I had learned when to let go. The house was silent, not empty, just calm. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside one last time for the night. The world was still there, waiting, moving, and for the first time, I felt ready, ready to let the story rest. When the time comes. I stood there quietly, looking out into the night. Nothing dramatic happened.
No sudden realization.
No strong emotion. Just peace. I thought about the life I once called easy. About the lessons I didn't understand then. About the man who taught me without teaching. I realized something simple. Life is not meant to be easy. It is meant to be lived. With effort. With patience. With acceptance. I had made mistakes. I had lost people. I had learned late. But I had learned. And that was enough. For anyone learning, remember this: every small step matters. Every mistake teaches you something. Every effort you make brings you closer to your goal. So keep going, keep trying, and never give up on learning, because one day, all your hard work will become your strength. I closed the notebook gently, and placed it back where it belonged, not as a memory, but as a reminder. I turned off the light, walked to my room, and rested. Tomorrow would come, just like always. And I was ready for it.